Rejection isn't just a personal wound, it's a mirror reflecting power, perception, and truth. Most people see it as a punishment, but in reality, it's a signal, a call to rise above conformity, to understand the systems that shape acceptance, and to reclaim your inner authority. The pain of rejection can either trap you in self doubt or awaken you to your independence. The choice is yours. Rejection often feels personal. It cuts deep, not because of what's said, but because of what it suggests, that somehow you're not enough. Yet, when you step back from the emotional sting and examine rejection through a wider lens, you begin to see something profound. Rejection is not a statement about your worth, it's a reflection of power. It reveals who gets to define value, whose standards dominate, and how systems shape our sense of belonging. The moment you realize that, rejection stops being a scar and becomes a source of awareness. From childhood, we're conditioned to seek approval from parents, teachers, employers, and peers. We learn early that acceptance equals safety. Follow the rules, meet expectations, stay likable, and you'll be rewarded with belonging. But what happens when you deviate, when you question authority, challenge tradition, or express a truth that doesn't fit the group's comfort zone? Suddenly, the same system that praised you for cooperation turns cold, the smile fades, doors close, and silence replaces validation. That moment isn't about you being unworthy, it's about you stepping outside a structure designed to maintain control. Rejection is the system's alarm bell. It goes off whenever someone starts thinking too independently. It's how power protects itself, by labeling nonconformity as failure, rebellion, or arrogance. If you think about it, every social, corporate, and political structure depends on predictable behavior. The moment someone breaks that pattern, the structure pushes back. That pushback is what we experience as rejection. It's the world saying, you're no longer playing by our script. But instead of seeing that as exile, what if you saw it as liberation? The truth is, power defines the rules of acceptance. It decides what's professional, what's normal, what's appropriate. And those who hold that power often reject what threatens it. If you bring new ideas to an old system, don't be surprised when the system shuts you out. That's not because your idea lacks merit, but because it exposes the limitations of those who benefit from keeping things the way they are. Rejection, in that sense, is an act of preservation, not of your failure, but of their comfort. Consider how many thinkers, artists, and innovators were rejected in their time, not for lack of talent, but for daring to challenge norms. The same pattern plays out in everyday life. When you decide to prioritize your mental health over corporate productivity, when you refuse to conform to toxic expectations, or when you simply choose truth over pretense, rejection follows. But that rejection is proof that you've outgrown the boundaries set by someone else's comfort zone. You're not being excluded because you don't belong. You're being excluded because you no longer obey. When people reject you, they reveal what kind of power dynamic they operate in. Those who thrive on control need agreement, not authenticity. They seek validation, not conversation. So when you bring realness, when you refuse to flatter, when you speak honestly, when you stand on principle, they can't digest it. They call it pride or disrespect, but really it's independence. And independence terrifies the insecure. They can't control someone who no longer fears rejection. The greatest shift happens when you stop taking rejection as a mirror of your inadequacy and start seeing it as a map of power. Every no marks a place where someone tried to define you. Every closed door outlines a boundary that was never meant for your spirit. You start realizing that being rejected by certain people, groups, or systems is not a loss. It's protection. It keeps you from molding yourself into something smaller just to fit into their frame. Rejection teaches you where not to invest your energy. It saves you from begging for acceptance in spaces built on imbalance. It gives you the clarity to see that belonging should never cost your authenticity. Because if being accepted means silencing your truth, then rejection becomes a form of survival, your spirit's way of saying, not here. This shift in perception turns pain into power. Instead of asking, why am I not good enough? You start asking, why does this system fear what I represent? That question flips the narrative. It moves you from self blame to self awareness. You stop seeing yourself as unworthy and start seeing yourself as aware of the hidden mechanics that shape who gets included and who gets dismissed. Rejection doesn't diminish you, it defines your edge. It clarifies your identity by removing what doesn't align. Every time someone turns away, you gain more truth about where your voice actually matters. The spaces that reject you are simply not evolved enough to hold your growth. They want the version of you that complies, not the one that transforms. But you don't owe them comfort. You owe yourself freedom. Once you stop fearing rejection, you become untouchable. You begin to create from authenticity, not approval. You start walking into rooms without shrinking for permission. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's comfort level. That is the point where rejection loses its power because you've taken it back. So the next time someone rejects you, don't shrink or retreat. Step back and observe. Ask yourself what that rejection reveals about their limits, their structure, their fear. Because it's never just about you. It's about power, who holds it, who challenges it, and who redefines it. And in recognizing that truth, you reclaim your own authority. You stop waiting to be chosen and you start choosing yourself. That's when rejection becomes what it was always meant to be, not a wound, but a window into your strength. We grow up believing that success is a reward for hard work, intelligence, and talent. We're told that if we follow the rules, stay consistent, and do everything right, doors will open and opportunities will appear. But when you look closer, you begin to see the fine print. Most systems don't reward creativity, honesty, or courage. They reward conformity. They favor those who obey, who don't question, who blend in seamlessly. The people who challenge the norm often face resistance, not recognition. It's not because they lack value, but because the system itself fears disruption. From the classroom to the workplace, conformity is disguised as excellence. In school, you're praised for memorizing what's already been said, not for questioning it. You're graded on how well you repeat information, not how deeply you understand it. In companies, promotions often go to those who align with the culture, not those who challenge it. Even in friendships or communities, acceptance often depends on how well you mirror the collective mood. We've built environments that mistake obedience for intelligence, politeness for virtue, and silence for maturity. And so the world ends up full of capable people who never discover their voice because they've been conditioned to silence it in exchange for belonging. Conformity offers comfort. That's why it's so appealing. It gives you a sense of inclusion, a feeling of safety, a script to follow. But comfort comes with a cost. Every time you suppress your perspective to fit in, a part of your individuality erodes. Every time you pretend to agree just to maintain harmony, your authenticity takes a step back. Systems thrive when individuals stop thinking for themselves. They function smoothly when no one asks, what or who benefits from this? That's why those who conform are often rewarded, not because they're exceptional, but because they help maintain the illusion of order. When you challenge the norm, you expose the imbalance that conformity hides. You make people uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because you remind them that they've accepted things they shouldn't. Systems don't like discomfort. They prefer predictability. So when someone speaks truth, questions authority, or tries something new, the system responds with rejection, criticism, or isolation. This isn't a reflection of your failure. It's a sign that you're no longer manageable. The problem is, conformity looks harmless. It's not forced, it's subtle. It hides in phrases like, that's just how things are, or be realistic. It whispers in your ear when you hesitate to share a different opinion. It rewards politeness over authenticity, loyalty over integrity, stability over progress. You're made to feel that blending in is wise and that standing out is reckless. But history tells the opposite story. Progress has always come from the outliers, the ones who dared to see differently, speak differently, and act differently. Every leap forward in society came from those who refused to conform to the system's comfort zone. Yet, systems keep evolving to make conformity feel like success. They offer shiny symbols of achievement, titles, salaries, recognition to those who play along. You get promoted not for challenging broken practices, but for efficiently maintaining them. You're praised for being a team player, which often means being silent about things that should be questioned. You're rewarded for adaptability, even when it means suppressing your principles. And after years of this, you start confusing obedience with success and comfort with happiness. That's how systems win, by convincing individuals to self regulate their potential. But there comes a point where something inside you begins to resist. It's the quiet realization that you've been applauded for being smaller than you really are. You start to feel that the acceptance you've earned isn't rooted in who you truly are, but in who the system needed you to be. That realization can shake you because it reveals the truth that fitting in often means giving up the parts of yourself that could have changed everything. Breaking free from conformity doesn't mean becoming rebellious for the sake of it. It means reclaiming your ability to think, to question, to act from conviction rather than conditioning. It means understanding that comfort zones are not safe zones. They are silent prisons built from social approval. When you choose authenticity over acceptance, you begin to dismantle the power that systems hold over you. You start operating from purpose, not permission. You'll face resistance, no doubt. Systems don't easily let go of those who keep them running smoothly. You'll be labeled as difficult, uncooperative, or different, but those labels are badges of freedom. They mark the transition from living as a product of the system to living as the architect of your own path. The truth is, the world doesn't need more obedient followers. It needs more conscious thinkers, people who see through the illusion of comfort and are brave enough to disrupt it. The irony is that the system's greatest strength, conformity, is also its greatest weakness. It creates predictability, but it also breeds stagnation. When everyone thinks alike, innovation dies. When everyone agrees, truth is lost. When everyone conforms, humanity becomes mechanical. The courage to think differently isn't rebellion, it's renewal. It's how societies evolve, how industries innovate, and how individuals awaken. So don't fear standing out. Fear blending in so well that you forget who you are. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you weaken the hold of conformity. You reclaim your voice from a system that profits from your silence. You remind the world that real growth begins not when we obey, but when we begin to question why obedience was demanded in the first place. Rejection stings because it feels final. It feels like a door closing on your worth, your talent, your effort. You pour yourself into something only to be told you're not enough, not qualified, not wanted, not right. But rejection isn't the end of the story. It's information, it's data, it's feedback from the world that, when understood correctly, becomes one of the most valuable teachers in life. The pain comes from misreading rejection as a verdict when it's really a measurement, not of your value, but of alignment. When you're rejected, something crucial is being revealed. It could be that your direction doesn't fit the environment you're in, that your timing isn't aligned, or that your energy simply doesn't belong in that space. Most people take rejection personally and stop there. They don't pause to analyze it. They don't extract the insight it offers. But if you treat rejection as data, you transform it from a wound into wisdom. You begin to ask better questions. What does this experience show me? What can I adjust, not about my worth, but about my approach? What truth is being shown that I might have ignored? Think about how scientists treat failure, not emotionally, but analytically. Every failed experiment reveals something about the process. Each mistake gives clarity about what works and what doesn't. Rejection in life functions the same way. It's feedback that points you toward a better alignment between who you are and where you're meant to be. When someone says no, they're giving you information about their capacity, their perception, or their readiness, not necessarily about your potential. The danger is that most people never get to this level of awareness. They stop too soon. Rejection convinces them to retreat, to lower their standards, or to conform. But what if rejection is actually redirecting you towards something greater? Every no you face can serve as a filter, removing what's not meant for you, refining your focus, sharpening your understanding of your path. Seen through this lens, rejection stops being something to fear and becomes something to study. For example, when a job application is denied, you could take it as proof that you're unqualified, or you could read it as data showing that your skills might thrive better in a different environment, one that values what you bring differently. When someone walks away from you, it's easy to assume you weren't enough, but it could mean that you were evolving faster than the connection could sustain. The pain remains, but the meaning shifts. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" You ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" The truth is, rejection is one of the universe's most precise instruments for direction. It trims away the paths that don't serve your growth. It removes distractions disguised as opportunities. It tests your attachment to approval and teaches you how to stand independently in your truth. Every rejection contains information about what you should stop chasing and where your energy truly belongs. But to receive that message, you have to stay calm enough to decode it. When you respond to rejection with self pity, you close the channel of learning. But when you respond with curiosity, you open yourself to insight. Curiosity transforms pain into progress. You begin to see patterns, the types of people who reject you, the kinds of places where you feel unseen, the systems that don't value your contribution. That awareness gives you power because now you can stop fighting for validation in places that were never built to appreciate you. You start investing your effort where it actually has a return. Rejection also reveals your level of internal stability. It exposes how much of your self worth depends on external validation. The stronger that dependency, the more rejection destabilizes you. But once you learn to separate external feedback from internal identity, you become unshakable. You start to see that rejection doesn't touch your essence, it only interacts with circumstances. The more detached you become from needing approval, the more freely you can create, explore, and grow. There's something liberating about realizing that rejection isn't failure, it's filtration. It filters out what doesn't align with your deeper mission. Sometimes the rejection you face is protecting you from settling too soon. The partnership that didn't work might be saving you for one that actually fits. The idea that didn't land might be training you to communicate more clearly. The audience that didn't respond might be shaping your authenticity for those who will. Every closed door refines your direction. What defines you isn't how many times you're rejected, it's how you interpret it. Those who treat rejection as defeat collapse under it. Those who treat it as data rise from it. They analyze, adapt, and reapproach with wisdom instead of bitterness. They learn to separate emotional reaction from strategic response. They stop saying, "They didn't want me," and start saying, "I learned where I don't belong." That's how resilience is built, through reflection, not reaction. The most successful and fulfilled people aren't those who avoid rejection. They're the ones who study it, use it, and outgrow it. They understand that every no they've ever received contributed to a deeper understanding of who they are and what they stand for. They realize that rejection has no real power over them unless they give it power through interpretation. So the next time you're rejected, take a breath and shift your perspective. Don't collapse, collect data. Ask, what is this showing me? What's the insight behind the emotion? What truth is being revealed about me or about them? Because once you learn to extract lessons instead of wounds, rejection stops being your enemy. It becomes your navigation system. It becomes the compass that leads you toward places where your presence isn't merely tolerated, but celebrated. The world has always been shaped by those who didn't fit, the ones who couldn't sit still inside narrow expectations, who refused to silence their vision to make others comfortable. They were called misfits, rebels, dreamers, outsiders, labels given by systems that feared what they couldn't control. But time always reveals the truth. It's the misfits who move humanity forward. It's the people who don't fit the mold who end up breaking it and building something entirely new. Every system, whether political, educational, or corporate, is built to preserve itself. It rewards predictability and punishes disruption. Stability is valuable to those in power because it keeps their influence intact. But stability often comes at the cost of creativity. Innovation requires tension. Progress requires someone willing to stand at the edge and say, this isn't enough. Misfits live in that tension. They are the uncomfortable reminders that the world can be better than it currently is. From science to art to social justice, every leap in human development began with someone being dismissed, doubted, or rejected. The ones who dared to ask, what do we do it this way, became the architects of new paradigms. When society said the earth was flat, someone questioned it. When industries said workers had no rights, someone fought back. When culture said beauty, intelligence, or power had only one form, someone redefined it. That pattern hasn't changed. The misfits keep evolving the system because they refuse to surrender their curiosity to conformity. But being a misfit isn't romantic. It's hard. It means walking alone through spaces that don't understand you. It means being judged not because you're wrong, but because you're early. It means watching others play safe while you take risks that might fail publicly. Misfits feel rejection deeply, but they also understand that rejection is the price of originality. You can't redesign a system while being fully accepted by it. Acceptance often requires compromise, and misfits would rather stand outside the walls than shrink to fit through the door. The strength of the misfit comes from perspective. They see the flaws others have normalized. They sense the cracks in the foundation long before it collapses. They don't just complain about problems. They reimagine structures. They ask questions that disturb comfort zones, but also open new pathways. Their value doesn't come from rebellion alone, but from vision, the ability to imagine something beyond the system's limits. Where most people see rules, misfits see experiments. Where most see tradition, misfits see possibility. Every system depends on a balance between order and renewal. Without order, chaos reigns. Without renewal, decay sets in. Misfits are agents of renewal. They challenge systems not to destroy them, but to evolve them. Their resistance keeps the collective mind alive. When organizations grow rigid, it's the misfit who sparks creativity. When cultures become complacent, it's the misfit who reignites imagination. They are not against the system, they're simply too alive to be contained by its boundaries. The irony is that systems often fight their best chance at survival by rejecting their innovators. Corporations dismiss employees who think differently. Governments ignore citizens who question authority. Schools silence students who learn unconventionally. Yet, when crises arise, those same systems depend on the ingenuity of misfits to save them. The world constantly resists what it eventually celebrates. The same people who are mocked for being too much often become the reference point for progress once the world catches up. To be a misfit is to live between worlds, the world that exists and the one that could. That in between space can be lonely, but it's also sacred. It's where vision grows. It's where new systems are born. The misfit's mind doesn't just adapt to reality, it questions it, bends it, redesigns it. That's not arrogance, that's evolution. Every invention, movement, or breakthrough that ever changed humanity started with someone who dared to imagine differently. The lesson here is not just to admire misfits from afar, but to embrace the misfit within yourself. Because at some level, everyone has a part of them that doesn't fit neatly into society's boxes. The tragedy is not in being a misfit, it's in hiding it to gain approval. When you suppress that part of yourself, you silence the very energy that could create transformation. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs more who stand out, question deeply, and build courageously. Being a misfit is not about chaos or rebellion for its own sake. It's about integrity. It's about refusing to betray your truth for comfort. It's about seeing the system as a tool, not a master. When you stop trying to belong everywhere, you start to build spaces that belong to you. Communities, businesses, ideas that reflect freedom rather than conformity. That's how systems evolve from the outside in through the courage of those who won't accept stagnation as stability. Every time a misfit speaks truth to power, the system trembles and something new begins. Every time someone chooses authenticity over approval, the world shifts slightly toward honesty. The misfits redesign the system not because they want attention, but because they can't live in pretense. Their very existence challenges complacency, and in doing so, they remind us all that progress never starts with agreement, it starts with courage. So when you feel out of place, misunderstood, or rejected, remember this: you might not fit the system because you were born to rebuild it. The discomfort you feel is not weakness, it's potential in motion. Systems exist to be reimagined. The misfit's role is to keep that imagination alive. And if history has proven anything, it's this: today's outsider often becomes tomorrow's foundation. Acceptance feels like warmth, the comfort of being seen, understood, and included. From childhood, we crave it. We chase it in school, in relationships, in work, and in society. It feels like safety, like proof that we matter. But what most people don't realize is that acceptance can quietly become a trap. It can turn into a golden cage where the more you're accepted, the more you must perform to keep that acceptance alive. You start living not as yourself, but as the version of you that others approve of. And the more approval you collect, the further you drift from your authenticity. The desire to belong is human, but the cost of belonging can be self erasure. We live in a world that constantly tells us who to be. It rewards compliance and calls it maturity. It celebrates those who fit in, who adapt to the group's expectations, who don't question the rules. And so, without even noticing, people start sculpting their identity around other people's comfort. They change their opinions to avoid tension, silence their emotions to seem stable, and dilute their truth to remain likable. But the price of being liked by everyone is being known by no one, not even yourself. Acceptance becomes a trap when it controls your choices, when every action, word, or thought runs through the filter of, will they approve? That question becomes your master. You start negotiating your values for validation. You stay in environments that drain you because leaving would risk disapproval. You tolerate unfair treatment because confrontation might cost acceptance. Slowly, you trade freedom for familiarity and independence for inclusion. The tragedy is that you might look successful on the outside, respected, admired, popular, but inside you're disconnected from your own truth. Most systems, whether social or professional, depend on this trap. They survive because people fear rejection more than stagnation. Workplaces encourage team players, which often means suppressing individuality for the sake of harmony. Social groups form silent contracts that reward sameness and punish authenticity. Even families sometimes enforce love conditionally. You're loved when you obey, when you meet expectations, when you fit the image. The result is a culture where acceptance feels like love, but it's really control dressed up as approval. The irony is that the more you chase acceptance, the emptier it becomes. Every time you earn approval through conformity, it deepens your dependence on it. You begin to mistake peace for passivity. You tell yourself you're avoiding conflict, but in truth, you're avoiding yourself. The longer you play that game, the more foreign your real voice becomes. You forget what you believe, what you want, what you stand for, because you've been too busy mirroring what others expect. At some point, though, something inside you starts to resist. It's subtle at first, a quiet unease, a fatigue that no amount of validation fixes. You begin to realize that all the acceptance you've gained hasn't brought you closer to fulfillment. That's the awakening. That's when you see the truth. Acceptance doesn't always mean belonging. Belonging happens when you are valued for your authenticity. Acceptance happens when you are tolerated for your conformity. The two are not the same. Freedom begins the moment you stop seeking to be accepted by everyone. It's when you recognize that some rejection is not a loss but liberation. The relationships, jobs, or groups that fall away when you start being honest were never real connections. They were transactions built on pretense. You start realizing that it's better to be alone in truth than surrounded by approval built on lies. Real peace doesn't come from fitting in, it comes from standing firm. When you detach from the need for acceptance, something shifts inside you. You start creating, speaking, and acting from authenticity instead of fear. You stop tailoring your dreams to fit other people's expectations. You begin to choose purpose over popularity, principle over comfort. That shift may cost you attention, but it will give you alignment. The very people who once approved of you might resist your evolution, not because you're wrong, but because your authenticity exposes their conformity. The hardest part of escaping the acceptance trap is the loneliness that comes with it. But that loneliness is temporary. It's the space where you meet yourself again. You start remembering the parts of you that you buried to stay accepted, your creativity, your convictions, your courage. You rebuild your voice, your boundaries, and your identity from truth, not performance. Slowly, the fear of rejection fades because you've built something stronger than approval, self respect. Acceptance feels good, but authenticity feels right. One depends on others, the other depends on integrity. One keeps you comfortable, the other keeps you alive. When you stop chasing acceptance, you start attracting alignment, people, opportunities, and experiences that resonate with your real self. You no longer have to earn your place, your presence becomes enough. So, don't mistake acceptance for love or agreement for connection. The world will always try to shape you into what's convenient. It will reward your obedience and question your originality. But the measure of a fulfilled life isn't how well you were accepted, it's how deeply you were true. The moment you stop bending to fit the mold is the moment you begin to live outside the trap, and that's where your real power begins. Rejection has a way of making you feel small. It hits with a silence that echoes louder than any insult. Whether it comes from a person, a group, or a system, rejection stirs up doubt and makes you question your own worth. But there's a deeper truth hidden beneath the pain. Rejection isn't just an ending, it's a rebirth. It's the moment you're forced to stop borrowing validation and start discovering your own power. The same energy that once made you chase acceptance becomes the energy that teaches you independence. Rejection, if understood correctly, is not a wound, it's an awakening. When people reject you, what they're really doing is freeing you from the limits of their expectations. They're showing you what they cannot handle, your depth, your difference, your strength. The sting you feel is the breaking of an illusion, the idea that your value depends on being chosen. The truth is, you were never meant to fit into every space. Rejection happens when you're outgrowing environments that can't hold your expansion. It's life's way of saying you're ready to stand on your own. That rejection strips away illusions that comfort you but keep you weak. It dismantles your dependence on external approval. When the people or systems you've tried to please suddenly push you away, it forces a confrontation with your real self. the part of you that existed before the applause, before the expectations, before you tried to become what others wanted. That moment, though painful, is the start of power, because you can't build true strength while you're still performing for belonging. Power doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in clarity. And rejection gives you exactly that. There's something raw about being rejected. It tears down the filters and the excuses. It shows you what's real. You start to see who stood beside you out of loyalty and who stayed out of convenience. You realize which goals were yours and which were inherited dreams, things you chased just to prove you could. Rejection becomes a reset button. It clears the noise, the fake support, the dependencies that drain your spirit. It leaves you face to face with yourself, and from that confrontation, a new kind of strength emerges, the kind that doesn't need validation to exist. The world teaches us that being chosen equals being valuable. We're trained to seek approval from teachers, bosses, lovers, and institutions. But the moment you stop being chosen, you discover something extraordinary. You can choose yourself. That's where rebirth happens. Because when you no longer rely on others to define your worth, you become unstoppable. Your motivation no longer comes from fear of loss, but from alignment with purpose. You stop begging for opportunities and start creating them. You stop chasing recognition and start radiating confidence. That's what self empowerment truly means, the ability to generate worth from within, regardless of who validates it. Rejection is also a mirror. It reflects the boundaries of others, their fears, their insecurities, their inability to understand what you bring. Most of the time, rejection says more about them than about you. But when you take it personally, you give away your power. When you analyze it with detachment, you reclaim it. You begin to see rejection as feedback, not on your worth, but on alignment. It tells you where your energy doesn't belong, where your vision won't thrive, where your time shouldn't be wasted. When you interpret rejection as guidance instead of judgment, you transform pain into direction. The rebirth of power through rejection is also emotional maturity in action. It's the moment you stop fighting for every closed door and start trusting timing. You stop seeing no as punishment and start seeing it as protection. Life doesn't take things away to weaken you, it removes what's not built for your next level. But you can't see that truth while you're still attached to being accepted. The break has to happen. The pain has to strip you bare before clarity can enter. Rejection cleanses you of false attachments so your next chapter can begin with truth. In that space of loss, you rebuild differently this time. You rebuild not from desperation, but from discernment. You learn to value solitude, to trust silence, to enjoy your own company. You realize you don't need constant affirmation to know you're enough. You stop running after what left because you finally understand that what's meant for you doesn't require chasing. It recognizes you. That's the kind of power that rejection unlocks, a quiet, grounded confidence that can't be taken away, no matter who stays or leaves. And when you rise again, you rise wiser. You no longer measure your worth by inclusion. You no longer dilute your truth for approval. You stop being addicted to acceptance and start being devoted to authenticity. You begin to walk differently, not arrogantly, but peacefully, because you've seen what happens when everything you depend on collapses and you still find yourself standing. That kind of power can't be taught. It can only be born through rejection. So when rejection comes, and it will, don't see it as the end of your path. See it as the end of pretending. Let it burn away the illusions of who you thought you needed to be. Let it reveal the version of you that doesn't depend on permission to exist. Because the moment you rise from rejection, you rise untouchable. The opinions of others lose their grip, and your energy shifts from seeking acceptance to embodying strength. That's the rebirth. That's the moment rejection turns from pain into purpose. When you finally realize that losing approval was never loss at all, but liberation.